is that behind you there, Tim?
It's my twin brother.
That is hilarious. How did you do that? How on earth do you do that?
It's a secret. Well, it's
I'm just going to be watching your background all night, Tim.
Yeah, I better turn that off.
Part of his plan and his strategy.
Yeah, maybe.
No,
That is hilarious.
There's a tool you can download for Mac called OBS, which is basically broadcasting software. So you can layer all these things and it creates a virtual cam that you can use Zoom.
And clearly, you've got content. Now, I seriously want to continue watching, so don't take it off yet.
I can also this.
Well, that one I've seen before, but
Or we can go to Hyperdrive.
it's awesome. So funny.
Oh, is that right? That's a cool little tool. Okay,
So, Councilor Rosner,
yes,
can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent. So Jim Rose from the school district is going to be on this call.
Awesome. So we got him an invite and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's Heather. It was either going to be Heather or Jim, and Jim's joining us. So.
Let's see here.
Where's that ding coming from?
Are you hearing things, Joe?
Of course not.
Did you ever hear back from our friend at Metro after you forwarded that email?
Nope. It was quiet. Radio silence after that.
Hey, Renee. Are you in your crochet room or quilting room?
No, I don't do any of that, but those are items behind me. Yeah.
Well, you must have some connection with someone who does a lot of that.
Yeah, my grandmother was very talented in that, and Rob's mom was also.
My mom makes quilts, which we have many in varying condition of repair, but they're wonderful.
Yep, same here. The ones behind me, well, some of them are antiques, and some of them are things that have been made for my kids when they were babies. So.
Hey, do you guys know we're live right now?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Rose.
Hello.
You can be expecting an email from Space Camp stuff a little later this week.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Fingers crossed we're going to go.
I think we have a better shot than we did last year.
That's good.
Yeah. Space Camp did a great job. They were open last summer for Alabama kids.
Mm-hmm.
They had half capacity, and they didn't have a single case of COVID in the kids or the staff.
Did they make us wear space suits the whole time?
Yeah, environmental suits. We're going to have a meeting in January. We'll go over all the procedures they're using, but they're doing a good job from what I can tell.
We're excited.
Yeah. Are you going to sign up to be a chaperone?
Maybe now that the bond's over.
Oh, yeah.
Is now joining.
That'd be fun.
It would be fun. Thanks for
Hey, Joe.
meeting, Jim, by the way.
Absolutely.
Hey, Joe.
Yes,
Hey, it's Sylvia.
yes.
Hey, listen, I'm dialed in on my desk phone. I'm having a few issues with my laptop, but I'm going to continue to try to dial in on my laptop, but I'm here.
Okay. Remember, don't be in on both because you'll cause feedback issues.
Okay.
Who's Josh? You signed in twice. Who's the unknown?
That's Sylvia.
Yep, I'm just here once. That's Sylvia this time.
Awesome.
And for those that just logged in, we are live right now. I think Brad wanted to make sure that everything was working smoothly before the meeting started.
Are we missing
Did I
anybody?
assume correctly, Brad?
I believe we are currently missing our guest speaker, just FYI.
Oh, you're fine. No worries.
So we're missing our TriMet guest. Joe, shall we switch things around? Or
My only concern with that
probably
is,
best to wait to do TriMet first.
yeah,
Wait a minute or two.
I'm concerned the TriMet may go longer and you may not, I don't want to bump against your 7 o'clock, and your other issue can go after the business meeting if necessary, so.
Good point.
And Julia, you had previously confirmed 6 o'clock with her, right?
Yes. And I believe she got an invite, correct, Brad? Okay. There she is. So, Mayor,
we're all here.
Hello.
Excellent. All right. So I'd like to call to order our City Council meeting work session for December 15th, 2020. 2 topics on our work session agenda. The first being TriMet updates.
And I'm going to start and just share my screen and introduce Brenda. Brenda Martin is a service planner with TriMet, and she and I have been talking a little bit about some service changes in Sherwood, and as part of that conversation, I know that there was an interest from counselors to discuss, changing routes and local service within Sherwood. And we thought that the best first start was for her to come and talk to you a little bit about how she plans and give you guys a better idea of kind of when and where and how those types of decisions are made. So I'm going to run the presentation. Hopefully you can see this. I can't see any of you, so that's a little awkward, but I'm going to run the presentation. She'll speak, and Brenda, if you can say next slide if I'm not going fast enough, because I literally can't see any of you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julia, and that is why I asked you to do the presentation, so I could look at people's faces. So thank you for taking the hard job today. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Martin. Like Julia said, I am a service planner at TriMet. Many of you might have met my boss, Tom Mills, who used to represent the Southwest region here in our TriMet region, and I have since taken over the job and have been sitting on the Washington County Coordination Committee and working with all the cities and kind of on the west side of the river to talk about service and transit. So our agenda today is I'm going to kind of do a quick overview of TriMet service in Washington County. I'm going to do what I like to call Service Planning 101 and give you some information about what goes into the decision on how to add service, change service. I will tell you a little bit about how TriMet is funded, at least from my department's standpoint. So I'm not going to go into the entirety of our funding mechanisms, but kind of how we get funding for service improvements. And then I figured we should certainly focus on Sherwood as much as we can. And I have some key questions for you and some topics we can discuss. So going over just our long range vision for service in Sherwood, talk about some proposals we're going to be making, we have made for our fiscal year 22. And then also to talk about downtown bus routing, which has kind of come up due to the COVID pandemic and the Alfresco program. And I thought this would be a good time for us to chat about what is working and isn't working with that routing. Next slide. So kind of a quick overview of transit in the region. So we have in total 82 bus lines. About 32 of those are in Washington County. In total, we have 15 frequent service lines, 5 light rail lines, and the red and the blue line go into Washington County. And then we have West Commuter Rail, Lyft Paratransit for our ADA services, and of course, Southwest Corridor, which is technically now on ice due to the funding measure not passing, but nonetheless, it is in our docket, and we still like to remember it's there. So TriMet really looks at itself as a kind of community job connector services. One thing that we do, we don't run, but we think works really well in addition to our bus service as a transit option to connect riders is our different shuttle programs. So these are programs not run by TriMet, but they are funded through some of the funding that comes into TriMet from the state. So we have them all over Washington County. We also have them in Clackamas and Portland. But we have kind of Grove Link in Forest Grove. We have the Tualatin shuttle. We have the West Link serving North Plains. So this is kind of looking regional, county-wide, but these connectors really help us to kind of connect those fringe boundary areas to that fixed route service that TriMet operates. Fixed route is incredibly expensive to operate, and we have a lot of union rules and costs that we must follow. So these shuttles end up being pivotal to those connections, and something I hope to talk about with you during this hour. So this is me getting into our Service Planning 101. So what are the considerations that go into when we change or add service? So here's kind of the main 5 considerations, but obviously there are others. So demand. Where are people going? Where do people live? Where should we respond? Connections, what are we connecting? Those destinations, those places. We think about jobs, we think about services, we think about commercial areas. Growth, so what places are growing rapidly, which places are going to see growth, how do we plan for that future change? And that certainly I know is happening in Sherwood. Equity, we always like to put an equity lens on where we're offering service and trying to serve the most transit dependent populations in our region. And then productivity, which I'll get into in just a moment, but very important to think about, that kind of bottom line productivity of a line. Other considerations, we'll always consider the cost of running that fixed route service and the operations. Do we have the buses? Do we have the operators? Do we have the garage space? So, kind of some of that more back of the room information, but still pivotal for where we decide to add service. So productivity, what does that really mean to TriMet? This is really just a very simplified equation of how much is the cost of running our service and what is the demand. When our buses are full, we can fit up to 40 to 50 people on the buses. That is incredible productivity because really that cost is being divided by so many riders. Lines that have fewer riders, that cost is still the same. A vehicle hour on a bus that has 10 riders is going to cost the same as one that, has 100 riders, but the productivity is obviously a lot lower. And so this ends up being a really important consideration for us to make sure that we are using the money that we have and the buses that we have to their utmost potential. And then we like to also hit on, where do we add new service? So maybe those other considerations go into changing service or adding service to existing service. So maybe we're adding earlier, later trips or midday trips or, more trips in the PM peak. But what we also like to think about is where are we going to add new service? And we like to think of these kind of 4Ds. So when we think about where we want to add maybe new service, we're going to want that density. We're going to want a lot of people needing the service. We like high density housing. We like diversity. And what we mean by diversity is diversity of uses. So we want there not only to be housing, but for there to be commercial, for there to be government institutions, something that's going to get people to come and go all day, not just one big influx of people maybe during the day or out during the day and then back in the evenings. Destinations, we're thinking schools, we're thinking hospitals, those places that are going to be job creators, but also drawing people in throughout the day. And then design, we're thinking here the design of the built environment. So, is this a place where people want to walk, right? Every transit rider is a pedestrian. So is that built environment make sense? Is it easy to get to the bus stops? And that one really ties into that pedestrian environment. So do you have wide enough sidewalks? Do you have safe crossings? Are the speeds low enough that you would feel safe walking along that street? Is there ample lighting that you feel safe getting off the bus in the evenings? So this all kind of goes into the work that I do with a lot of the urban renewal areas. And I know there's one in Sherwood by the new high school. So really wanting to work with your community and your consultants to make sure that, the streets you are literally building from scratch will one day be able to serve the transit demand that might be needed there. Okay, so that was Service Planning 101, just a really quick look at how our transit service gets funded. And here I'm saying improve transit service. This is just really saying, okay, we want to add a morning trip to the 93, or we want to add some midday trips to the 94. That money, that funding is going to come one of two ways. We have an employer payroll tax, which is a 10-year phase in. I can't remember what year we are. Oh, currently in year 5. I think that might still be true. I think next year is year 6. And that's about $5 million of new revenue every year. And so we have about that much to, add a few trips here and there onto the system. to try and address that demand. The second funding source is HB 2017 Keep Oregon Moving Act, which was the state measure that passed in 2017, which added an employee payroll tax. So we all see that come out of our paychecks every 2 weeks or every month. This is about $100 to $120 million over 5 years. So it's a 5-year phase-in, and it's all dependent on employee payroll. So these numbers are going up and down depending on how many employers, how many employees. You can imagine with COVID, both of these revenue sources have been greatly impacted, and we're just starting to see those numbers. Kind of everything is back a few quarters. We're starting to see those numbers plummet, but we are hopeful that we'll be able to get them back up, and we'll be able to have a thriving economy with people having jobs and hopefully paying into this payroll tax.
And Brenda, on the improved service, that's not just more frequency of buses, but that's also if we changed routes or elongated routes or did things that resulted in essentially more time of a bus on the road. Is that correct?
Yeah, for us, that is all considered an improvement. If we're gonna, we're planning on making the line 56 from Washington Square Mall down to South Cooper Mountain and Beaverton. That's an extension of that line. We consider that an improvement. We do, a lot of times we can reroute buses and save, use the same amount of vehicle hours, but if we do need more vehicle hours, that's an improvement. So all of that fits under that improvement. Next slide. So we just went through HB 2017 is a 5-year plan. There was an advisory committee that was put together in 2018 to allocate the funding over those 5 years. But obviously, like I said, the funding changes, and we had just projected what we were going to be able to make during that time. That funding has changed. So we did have some extra funding in HB 2017 from those first 2 years, and the state does require a biennium. And so we just did one for FY22 and FY23. And just as we were getting this process started, well, the pandemic hit. So everything changed, and kind of we all had to focus in on what you'll see here in that kind of bigger dark gray pie slot, which is service preservation. So all the extra funding that was kind of coming in over the last few years, instead of allocating them into maybe other pieces of the pie that you see here, we really focused the committee and TriMet into looking at how can we continue to preserve the service that we currently have on the road in order to continue to help those that are already relying on service. But we do still have some funding towards service expansion, which is that kind of new service or elongated service. All of that is already kind of allocated towards lines that the committee looked at and chose in 2018. So it's really just implementing their plan. And we can talk more about that if you have questions. And then just the rest of the pie, we had our low income fare program, which kicked off in 2018. It has been a huge success. The electric bus program, which is really all non-diesel program, looking at electrifying, going non-diesel. Some capital projects, senior disabled transit, and then regional coordination, which is the shuttle. That's really where we're talking about that shuttle funding that comes kind of through the state, through TriMet, and then TriMet gives it out to the counties, who then operate shuttles through either themselves or ride connection. So right now that's $6.2 million for the 2 fiscal years. I'm going to keep going, and hopefully we'll get now to the nitty gritty and the part where we can have a lot of conversation. So these are the slides having to do with Sherwood. What you see here on the screen is a screenshot of our Southwest Service Enhancement Plan. This was adopted in 2015. This is our long-range vision.
Brenda?
Yes.
I apologize. This is Tim Rosner, one of the counselors. Just real quickly, you mentioned a committee that works through kind of the route selection and makes recommendations. I'm assuming that's what they're doing. Who's on that committee, and how are small or how are the fringe cities represented on that committee?
There are about, I want to say 30 or so committee members from all different backgrounds. There are some elected officials. There's some transit advocates. And I can look to see if who I think there is somebody from Washington County. I don't know how much there is actual kind of city representation as much as there is kind of regional representation.
Maybe you could just send that to us. I'd just like to understand, because on the Washington County side, Hillsborough and Beaver tend to dominate those type of committees, and it's hard for us out on the fringes to sometimes get really good representation. So, but you can just send that to us. We don't need
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Okay, so so this screenshot here is from our Southwest Service Enhancement Plan. Our service enhancement plans, there's 5 of them throughout the region, and they're our long-term vision of where we imagine we would want to add service, kind of in that 5 to 10-year range. None of these come with any funding, so this is really just as funding comes in, these are the set sort of places and locations that we would want to invest in service. So, you know, I didn't probably zoom in just into Sherwood because I kind of wanted to show the kind of more, you know, half of the Southwest area, because this really shows the yellow blobs are places where we think those kind of community job connectors that I was discussing make the most sense for the type of ridership and the type of demand, the diversity and destinations of these locations. You know, one of the places that I know has come up a lot is the kind of Borland Road, Oregon City to Tualatin connection. And then, you know, we do have this vision of having some sort of shuttle around the kind of Sherwood area that I believe is now being looked at for development. And then you see the 93, the 94, and then what we have here called the line A, which is now the line 97. All right, next slide.
Oh, I have one more question for you.
Oh, sure, Counselor.
Actually, that was a lie. I'll have more questions.
Okay, that's okay. That's why I'm here.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about it. You were talking about how you look at vehicle miles as a key measure in terms of the cost of a particular route. So when you're evaluating that, are some of the trade-offs you can consider saying, well, maybe we don't need as much frequency on this route, which means we could make this route extend farther or maybe take a different path? I mean, those are kind of some of the trade-offs that can be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, you know, span, frequency, headways, things like that are ways that we are able to maybe provide service, but try to lower that cost. And you'll see that throughout the region of places that maybe we only provide peak commuter service. So you'll see maybe 4 to 5, you know, runs in the morning, and then you'll see 4 or 5 in the evening. And then, you know, as those get more demand and have higher ridership, we might start adding a little bit of that midday service, or maybe we start adding a little bit on each side. And so we do like to kind of build our services up. But yeah, I think it all just depends on those destinations, where are people going, what kind of services are they trying to use.
Okay, well, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So I thought I would give you at least a quick look into the 3 routes that serve Sherwood. I did decide to use fall 2019 data because it's really optimistic and it puts a smile on my face versus our COVID numbers right now, which is just
makes sense.
Yeah, they're a little hard to stomach sometimes, and I like to just pretend that one day we'll be done with this chapter in our lives. So for the line 93. This is a short line. It goes from Sherwood to Tiger Transit Center. It has really good service. It goes from about 4:30 in the morning to midnight. So it's got this really long span, and it's about every half hour. Maybe, you know, I say about because sometimes in that PM, those commuter peaks, we have better service. And the average ridership is pretty good. It's 640. I did just weekdays. They tend to be higher. The 93 is really interesting. It does actually have really good weekend service. It's the only line in Sherwood that has weekend service. And so there are, we see a lot of people using this on Saturdays, especially a little bit on Sundays, to get to Tiger Transit Center and probably make other transfers there, or maybe try and use different services in Tigard. And I'm going to talk to you more about the line 93 and the 94. So just a little foreshadowing. The line 94 is our kind of commuter line that goes from Sherwood to downtown Portland. It serves every stop the 93 does from Sherwood to Tigard Transit Center. And once the 94 hits the Tigard Transit Center, it then does limited stops along Barber until it gets into downtown Portland. So it's a great commuter route if you live anywhere along that Sherwood to Tigard area. And so you can see that our ridership is over 2,300 riders during the weekdays. And so, and this is daily numbers, by the way. I mean, this is like on any average given day.
Do you have any sense of how many of those riders continue past Tigard Transit Center versus how many may transfer there?
Not currently, but I am, well, no, not currently. I'm trying to work on collecting some hop data. Likely, we feel like so the 94 doesn't have the same span as the 93 does. So, it runs from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is really those commuter hours, with very frequent service in that commuter peak, but not a lot of it's only about once an hour midday. So just kind of understanding the two lines, I think if you are in Sherwood at any given commuter time and you're going to downtown Portland, the 94 is a one-seat ride. And you're probably going to get a seat, which is really nice. I hear that's kind of...
I'm just thinking about, like, if I'm someone going from Sherwood and my stop is either before the Tigard Transit Center or I'm going to have to transfer there anyway, I'm going to get on the first bus that comes, right? So it could be the 93 or the 94. So being able to understand how many people, from the 94 transfer off, like if half of them continue past Tigard Transit Center or 75% or whatever, but it's fine. I understand.
So when you say, just another question on that, when you say ridership for line 94, for instance, which is a much higher number, that's for the entire line, right? So, I mean, do we understand, like, for instance, what is just from Sherwood to that transit center, what that ridership looks like? Because anecdotally, I can sit out at like Symposium and watch 6 buses come by in 30 minutes and they're all empty, and so, we're trying to understand what the actual ridership is coming out of our downtown area, connecting into your system.
Okay. Yeah, I assumed that 2,300 meant 2,300 people are getting on in one of the Sherwood stops, but if it's the whole ride, it could be a fraction of that.
So it's the whole ride, but we have to think about that. Once the 94 gets to Tigard Transit Center, it only makes 4 additional stops after that.
Right, but the question is the 2,300 number, where do all of those start in Sherwood or end in Sherwood? Or is that exiting for anyone who gets on? Like 2,000 of those could be between Portland and Tigard, and only 300 are between Tigard and Sherwood. I think that's Tim's question.
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to say is it would not be that, since there's only 4 stops along Barber from Tigard to downtown Portland. It is safe to assume that most of those riders, the majority of those riders, are getting on between Sherwood and Tigard Transit Center.
I don't know that I would agree with that statement.
I hear what you're saying.
Brenda, don't you guys have the ons and offs? I know I've gotten that from Tom at some points, and maybe it's just certain points in time where you have the actual ons and offs at specific stops, or am I making that up?
Yeah, we can get that.
Yeah, because anecdotally, just because we're in the downtown area all the time, the buses are almost always empty, and I was just doing some math based on the number of buses, that 30-minute frequency and stuff, and those are pretty full buses with that kind of number coming out of Sherwood on a weekday. So
yeah, those are very full numbers. I mean, it could be that most of those people are getting on at Tigard Transit Center. That is true.
That's what my guess is happening.
So Brenda, this is Keith. Quick question.
Sure.
So to be clear, 94 runs throughout the day, but just higher frequency during the commute peaks.
Yes.
So what is the frequency from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.?
It's about once an hour right now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And that 94 evolved because at one point, maybe when they created 94, but when I moved to Sherwood, we had a great express service that went from downtown Sherwood to downtown Portland with just a handful of stops, and it was very popular in the scheme of things for our population and stuff because of that. Then it's evolved over time so that some of them now everybody had to transfer in Tigard, which was a big problem and drove people away from TriMet. And then there were services and maybe it's the differentiation now between 93 and 94, where 93 stops everywhere every stop between Sherwood and Tigard Transit. And you have to transfer or go somewhere else. And 94 goes all the way to Portland, but does 94 hit every stop between Sherwood and downtown Tigard?
Yes, it does.
And then limited?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So 94, while it's better because you don't have to transfer and wait, and I don't know how many stops that means between Sherwood downtown and Tigard downtown, but if you're a commuter that works downtown, that still is a less ideal service than what we had 15, 20 years ago. Because it's slower.
You were saying it was a limited express route from Sherwood to downtown Portland without stopping on 99.
It was like two or three stops in Sherwood, a stop in King City, a stop, Bull Mountain type area, and then Tigard, and then express, I think, from Tigard, or maybe just a couple stops. But it was, instead of 10 or 15 total stops, it was more like 6.
Okay.
It was a much preferred level of service, for sure.
And if I recall correctly, I think that TriMet, and this has been, gosh, probably 8 years or so, they eliminated that and kind of created, I'm guessing, the line 93, and then got so much pushback that they sort of recreated they basically created the 94 to address the pushback that they got, but it certainly wasn't the same service that there was before. But that was kind of, I think, 94 was the compromise to that lost service, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yep. I believe that's true.
Because people are just weighing how long will it take me to drive it versus ride the bus. And if the bus ride gets too long, they're just going to drive.
Yeah.
Well, if they're going to
Kim?
it's also the cost of parking.
Kim's got her hand up.
I do. So I think it would be interesting really to see how many riders actually got on in Sherwood, because we have a resident who lives where both buses, line 93 and 94, come by her house every 30 minutes. And she's saying typically the buses are empty. So it's I think it's a little frustrating for how close they are to her house. And then the perception that, possibly people aren't really even using them. So it would be interesting to see some data on how many people are getting on and off in Sherwood.
Yeah, so if that resident, I'm guessing, is on the current reroute, yeah, they probably are seeing some empty buses. Our ridership is down 70% right now. So I understand that is certainly probably the case.
And I think if we see the data, I think it'll show that the biggest percentage or area of Sherwood riders that get on and off is at the movie theater.
So I ended up, I hope you all don't mind that I am multitasking because I do have two screens. So I did pull up at least my kind of average ons and offs on the line 94 in the fall of 2019. So it looks like the most ons is at Southwest Railroad in Washington, with 42 ons on average, which that's a bus full of people. I mean, that's throughout the day, so it's not all like at the same exact moment. And then from, so there weren't a lot of ons in what I'm guessing is the downtown area, the Sherwood Boulevard and 12th and Sherwood Boulevard and Gleneagle.
And I think the reason
Gleneagle. Thank you.
And I think the reason you're seeing ons at that particular spot is that there is a park and ride, a very small one right there. And one of the things we would like to talk about, because we already have the big park and ride over at the movie theater, does it really make sense to have a park and ride in the downtown area when people are driving to that, when they could just drive to the movie theater and get on there? Because it is eating up a lot of parking space in downtown Sherwood as well for our businesses.
And it's kind of a really weird, it forces the buses to snake through our narrow old town streets for no reason other than the park and ride. So it could improve service to move that.
Well, I certainly have a slide where I would like to talk to you about downtown routing.
Okay.
That's a very, it's a very current event that I think are dealing with, because we currently do not have the buses running through there. And I'd love to hear how that is working for all of you and the businesses, and then understanding, as I just heard that where we are currently running is more residential. And so I know we have heard a few comments. I know Julia has let me know you have heard a few comments. So I'd love to get a little of your thoughts on that. I can finish up here, or we could just move on to that point. I'm okay with either.
I think it would be good for me to see more of that ONS data. I mean, if you're saying the number one is only 42 for the whole day, that means between all of the Sherwood stops, it might be 100 or a couple hundred at most, which is a really small number. Anyway, I also, the thought, like looking at 97, the fact that it's only 70 the whole day, I mean, that's a couple of people per bus.
Oh, yes, that's very low productivity. I agree.
So, and remember, the line 97 is limited hour. It's a much more limited time frame. So I don't even think it runs every half hour during the non-commute times. Is that correct, Brenda?
Correct. Yeah, that was kind of.
I was just going by what the slide said. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is about every. If you divide the average by those 12 hours, but it's about maybe once every 45 minutes every hour, kind of in that non-peak time. And it's really just connecting folks to the west, right? So these are, when we look at this service in Sherwood, the 94 and the 97 are really trying to operate more as these commuter connections for people trying to either get to downtown Portland, get to the West Station to go somewhere north or south. And the 93 ends up being kind of the daily workforce of the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's an expensive shuttle for 3 to 4 people.
Well, I think the line 97 was in the service enhancement plan because of the Tonkin employment area and the Tualatin industrial area. And so while it's very low now, I think that the expectation is that, as it goes over time, it will certainly get better. But.
And I believe it's only been in service for about 2 years. So it's a really new line. So it's not surprising that the numbers are that low. And, again, we kind of come across that chicken or the egg of when to add service. You don't want to add service too late when there's already too much demand and people have now chose other modes, but you want to kind of add it at the point where you are going to get some ridership. I think we would love to see ridership higher on the 97, but it might just take us a little while to really develop that area between Tualatin and Sherwood. And, the service enhancement plan actually has the line 97 going into Tigard, kind of along 72nd. So, it has more future in kind of this long range plan, but for now we did kind of implement this improvement to see how it would do. And it's been slow. And I have no idea what the future is of the line 97. I would be surprised if it had 70 riders today.
Yeah, So one of the things we'd like to consider and put into the mix too, or at least I would, maybe a couple of others, is right now a lot of the buses come into downtown, turn around, and go out. And so, basically for every bus in, you're getting 2 passes. The one person that Kim brought up where it goes by her house, that's 2 passes just for one bus, right? Because they're going around the circle and coming back. That's a good picture. So one of the things that we would like to talk to TriMet about is maybe looking at a wider geography and saying, can we route the buses such that they're just passing through downtown? Like, for instance, have a bus come in on Sunset with a stop at the YMCA through downtown and out through Walmart on Langer and back that way. Because now not only are you reducing the trips through downtown, but you're also providing better service to the wider community, and people over on the south side of town could actually take the bus to Walmart, for instance, in that area. So you're actually, and you could have them go the opposite directions too, or alternate, or do something like that. But look at maybe thinking differently about how the service is even coming into town and coming out of town, if that makes sense.
And I think, Brenda, that is getting into what you and I talked about, the how and the when those types of decisions are made. And I know the council is very interested in that. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how those types of major rerouting decisions are made versus the minor ones that you're talking, or maybe minor ones that you're talking about right now?
Yeah, I think so. With our service enhancement plan, that's really our blueprint of looking at how to add service, where to add service. That's kind of where we start. We also start at looking at our service that is existing. We do this about once a year. We have our annual service plan. So we usually look at the data, look at requests that come in about once a year, and I would say it's in spring. So this is great timing to kind of bring up any comments or ideas you might have. And a little bit after spring, we'll start really looking at what is feasible. Are changes to lines possible? We like to do 2 different outreach cycles to community members, riders, to talk about, look, we're going to propose these changes. And that happens in fall and then early spring. So we just did our first level of outreach in November for changes that we want to make in fiscal year 22, which would be this next September. So we start doing outreach a whole year before any changes would occur. We do that outreach. We look at, the cost, back to those considerations. How much is it going to cost? Is it going to cost more to make this change? Can we make it cost neutral? If it is going to cost more, where do we get that funding? Did we have ever extra HB 2017 funding? Was it already planned as part of the funding mechanism of other, funding streams? Once we have a better understanding, then we go back out to our riders in spring and say, okay, we had talked to you about this. Here's what we heard, some feedback on, yes, we like this. No, we don't like this. This is where we landed, and we get feedback on that. Once we get that second feedback, we then go to our board, and we do our first reading with our board sometime in spring, and then a second reading, and that's when they approve the annual service plan. And once it's approved at the TriMet board, then we go through, what we have to do to implement it internally to either, so for fiscal year 22, that means that we could do any of those changes in either fall of 2021 or spring, so March of 2022. And it just depends on the funding, when we would have that funding to change, how big of a change is it? Is it going to change the maps? Is it just going to change the bus stops? Are we going to have to do outreach to a new area that's going to be served by buses that maybe aren't getting buses today? So that's kind of, it's this kind of big, messy maybe, but, there are certainly touch points in which we do have to do certain things. And that just is those 2 outreach times and then the board passing in time to then implement the service. And I see a hand up. Commissioner Garland?
Yeah, that's me. Hi, that's Sean Garland. So you're talking about this outreach process that you just went through. Was Sherwood part of that? Were we contacted for any feedback?
Yeah, so we have one proposal on FY22 for changes to the line 93 and the line 94, and we have done outreach to the community. I believe I spoke to Julia about it and other communities that go along the 93, 94. For the change you're seeing on the map right now, which is this reroute, this was a quick COVID response. We rerouted the bus off of Railroad because of the Alfresco program, and we were able to change it so that it traveled northeast on First. So we did not do outreach necessarily for that change because it was at the request of the city to get off of the street. And we have been trying to be incredibly accommodating throughout the region for these sort of COVID responses. But we have been doing and will continue to do outreach for the fiscal year 22 proposal.
This is Councilor Rosner again. How you mentioned you do a demand analysis. What's the demand? So how does that work in areas that don't have current services? Like for instance, we have areas of town where there are no busing options. So how do you capture that potential demand in that analysis?
We will just look at, what are the services along there? Are there places that people are trying to go that are going to make transit a desirable mode to get there? You mentioned Walmart. I'm going to be frank, Walmart does not tend to be a huge transit generator. That doesn't mean it can't be, but it's a lot of times Walmarts are surrounded by huge parking lots, and that's just not a great pedestrian environment. And you're not going to shop a lot there, but that doesn't mean we don't. I don't know what exactly is around this Walmart. I don't know if there are other things that we could serve near this commercial area. I think another consideration for any changes would be how much farther from the routing you currently see it would be. And then also layover. So, we have a layover in Sherwood where our operators can park the bus and use the restroom. So anywhere else we go, we're going to need those same accommodations. We need somewhere that we can leave the bus. We need somewhere we can put in bus stops. So there's a lot of these smaller nuanced considerations for operations besides just how the bus travels to and
Sure.
from.
And I only mentioned Walmart as a landmark. Around there's a huge entertainment fun center. There's a Target. There's restaurants and movie theaters and all kinds of stuff over in that area of town.
Okay.
But and kind of where my head is on this is I'm thinking about we have we have a senior center, we have multiple we have the YMCA, the library, low income areas, we have multiple independent living and nursing homes, for lack of a better term, around town. And when you look at the map and where they're located with some smart rerouting, we can start to service all those so seniors can get to the grocery store when they're in an independent living situation where they can't drive anymore, and make sure we're servicing our low-income areas and stuff like that. So that's kind of, I'm curious, I know you ran through the process of how ideas get on the table with TriMet, but how do we as a city put forth some of these proposals, work with your staff to make sure that they're getting evaluated and all the information that needs to get wrapped around it. So I'm assuming that committee fleshes all that out before it goes to your TriMet board. Is that the case?
The committee doesn't necessarily flesh out maybe the changes you're discussing. I think something we would really have to think about is, as we start trying to think about these other services that you think transit could serve better, where are they? How close are they to each other? How easy is it the bus to really travel there? I mean, the physical travel of a bus and the turns, those it's sometimes as simple as that, right? Like the straighter the better. Deviations are really difficult for us. A 40-foot bus takes a lot of room. I mean, we know this probably from Railroad. I'm sure this is part of the
trust me, we understand that. We understand that because we see the buses sit at an intersection in downtown Sherwood for 15 minutes because cars aren't smart enough to stop ahead of the stop sign, so they have time to turn. I totally get that. I think as you guys dig into the detail, you'll find a lot of the areas I'm talking about are on easily run roads.
So I,
Yeah,
really to
so-
answer your question, if there's a proposal that the committee, that you counselors get together and want us to pursue, I mean, we will certainly look at it. We understand this is your community, this is your, these areas the best. We can only keep so much of a finger on the pulse of all the different communities we serve. I would say we are always open to looking. We're going to continue to look at those considerations that I kind of walk through on, yes, of course,
Renee, your hand is up.
diversity, but also that cost in that operation.
I was just going to ask, I'm sorry, Brenda, back in, I think it's 2014, 2015, there was some conversation about having a bus go out to the YMCA and making a layover area actually on the property that the YMCA exists. And then there was some outreach, if I remember correctly, to the community that wasn't very favorable. So there was more conversation about a smaller bus, but then things just kind of stalled. Do you know what transpired with that?
I do not. Unfortunately, that is before my.
I can maybe.
Oh, Julia,
a little bit. I think that was when they were doing the service enhancement plan, and I think that's when the concept of having that be addressed through a more local shuttle was. I believe that's kind of where that came from, is solving that with a smaller bus, because there was a lot of pushback at the idea of buses down Sunset from the public, is my understanding. And then also there was some discussion several years ago about a bus going down Langer, not Langer, I mean, it would ultimately be Langer Farms Parkway, but also Langer Drive. And there was a lot of pushback and concern from the HOA in that area about buses on those streets. So I guess I was going to ask, sort of, that's another thing that they deal with, is not just a great idea and a street that can accommodate it, but then TriMet's also balancing the concerns that they're hearing. And I guess I'm curious, Brenda, how you weigh that when you've got, a need and it's a great location and it can accommodate the buses, and you've got a council saying we want it there, but then you hear from the public that they don't want it there. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that is a really hard one, and I do think it really depends on our board and what our board hears. And if we have a lot of people come to our board and make testimony against something, they're less likely to want to keep it in the annual service plan, and that has certainly happened. We can only do so much. We have. I will say, even right now for FY22 proposals, with COVID, what we're trying to do is keep everything cost neutral. So every change we're doing is a cost neutral change, but some of them are deviations for buses that are just going in places that are really low demand, which is, I think, what we're kind of talking about here. There's a lot of pushback for those changes, because while it's only 70 people riding the 97, there are probably people that really rely on it, and that could be 70 people talking to my TriMet board. And that's a loud voice, even though it's only 70 people out of thousands. It's a lot. They take up a lot of time. So there have certainly been things we've tried to do, and just we can't get past the board's approval. So yeah.
So kind of going back to a previous question. So whenever we're suggesting a change or maybe a different way of doing things, we can sit here on our side, go, well, it makes so much sense to go this route. And to your point, there's other factors that we need to look into. But what's really key is finding a way through that formulative process for our staff to partner with your staff, so we can partner with our communities to come up with suggestions and ideas that are going to pass the muster instead of just throwing things over the wall. So what's the process to do that? How do we engage with your organization to go through that process, to evaluate how we better serve certain parts of our town and reduce the bus congestion in our downtown core area, evaluate moving the park and ride? What is that process? How do we engage with TriMet?
I mean, I think you're doing it right now. There's no There's no formal process. We're not a council, so you don't have to. There's no Robert rules to talk to me. This is really it. I mean, having Julia on your team, I think she really has a direct connection to us. We talk often. She's the first person I reached out to when we were proposing changes to FY22. So I'd hope that she would be a staff member on your team that can kind of maybe be the conduit between us, unless you want to talk to us directly. But I think this is it, and I'm exactly that person. And if we want to have a workshop where we throw things on the wall and we create a proposal, and I'm not the decision maker. I take it back. I talk about it with the rest of my service planning team. I have to check in with scheduling. I have to check in with finance. But I think I'm your gateway into TriMet, and I hope you can use me for any of those ideas. I'm so glad that you asked to talk to me, because I hope that with the 7 minutes we have, I really need direction on whether you would like to see the bus go back to Railroad Way, or can we keep it rerouted, which is this kind of lighter orange that's going into this loop-de-loop, which and I hear you saying there's a lot of buses going through Sherwood, where FY22 proposal, which I didn't get to get into much, is actually going to combine the 93 and the 94 into one route. So we're going to retire the 93, and you're only going to have the 94. And we're hoping that that's actually going to reduce the number of trips in downtown Sherwood, and it's just going to make it more efficient. And you know what? If you want to only go to Tiger Transit Center, you get off at the 94. And if you want to go all the way to downtown Portland, you have a seat. And you don't have to think about, well, the 93 is coming now. And but maybe I'll wait for the 94. So I'll have a one-seat ride. Doesn't matter. You're going to get on the 94.
So when are they
going to help?
Sorry, Councilor Young. When is it that they're going to retire that?
So this is a proposal. So we have
for
it's not
fiscal
passed
year
yet.
22. Okay.
So it's proposed to happen in either September of 21 or March of 22.
And that's, I want to chime in. That's really the big ask that Brenda has of you, is your thoughts on that. This is what's proposed, but she's, reaching out. I absolutely would like to, if you are interested, and I believe that you are, have her come back on a regular basis, because there's clearly a lot of interest, and she could just kind of give you guys updates, maybe quarterly. This is what's, maybe that's too much. I don't know. But so I think we can definitely have her come back and talk more. But I think tonight she really wants to get gut feedback on the.
So there's nothing here to be enough gut feedback on. Just to say you're going to combine them is not enough detail to do anything today.
Sorry to interrupt. I think the thing I really want the gut impact on is more about the downtown routing. The FY proposal is really to let you know that we're still proposing this. This is and more inform you about what it was. We're going to be doing rider outreach in January. So we're going to ask the riders, which I hope you all understand is who we need to talk to. But obviously, if it's something that didn't work with your council, we certainly want to know that. But I do think it's going to get to one of your kind of concerns, which is a lot of buses in downtown Sherwood. We think we're going to address some of that with the combination. And then wanting to hear from riders, like, does this make sense? And there's a huge question about weekend ridership, which is its own thing, and I certainly don't have time to get into. But I do want to come back, like Julia said. But if you wouldn't mind giving the next 4 minutes, because I do believe you have a council meeting after this, on, your alfresco program could end at any moment. There is now a vaccine, so people might be eating indoors again. And once that goes away, our kind of way of thinking is that we're currently on reroute, and we would go back to our regular route, which is this dark red routing. Our operators, our field team, our supervisors actually really like the current routing, which is to go around that little loop-de-loop. But I know we've heard from some neighbors, both your team, my team, Julia's team. So as a council, do you have any advice? Would you like to do some outreach together? I feel like we're at a point where it's businesses versus residents, and that's always a tough place to be.
Well, and I mean, for me, I think we need to do some outreach. I mean, I know we've heard from one or two, pretty vocal opponents, but I've also heard from a lot of people who really also like the new routing as well, because, the bus is not going through the streets in downtown and making left-hand turns and cutting off has really improved, pedestrian and traffic flow down there as well. My biggest question personally is what impact, if any, does that have on people using the park and ride? Because if somebody is, mobility challenged or, having to walk that 2.5 blocks or whatever to a stop, might be a burden. So that would be my biggest question. Other than that, I'm a big fan of the new routing.
And this is Councilor Rosemary again. I think we need a little bit more time, to Doug's point, to do some outreach on that. Is there an option C? I mean, if you're just purely asking about going current routing to new routing, is there another routing we could look at to kind of minimize, to kind of get the best of both worlds?
Sure. But I guess I do want to just point out from just my expertise on this that any routing you pick is going to get somebody who's going to call you who isn't going to like it. So anyone who we choose to put a bus down their street will make sure to let us know.
So I think generally the route, this is a good partial solution, I think, and let staff, and I know Doug Scott is interested, and if another counselor is interested in engaging offline, the opportunity, so you're not always going around what we call the parabout every time, is to create bidirectional loops. And I think it's a probably the same amount of mileage, and gives better coverage, and helps in the community. So I think there's opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not a bus, but I've actually done this. I went out and drove my car from basically the corner of Tualatin Sherwood Road and 99, and drove, the bus route into Old Town, and then continued through the roundabout that you guys are currently turning out on, went out Langer Farms Parkway, and then, continued on Langer Farms Parkway up back to 99, and then versus what the bus does now, and there's a negligible, if any, difference in the time that those two routes take. Obviously, I'm not a bus, and I don't make the bus stops, and there's time of day and traffic and all that stuff. But just from a high level, it's not really a considerable difference, and you could service additional areas that people might want to go to or from. So
yeah, I think I hear you on the loops. I think loops just can be hard because we won't go back to serving the areas where we just drove through. So at one point the bus will go down Main and then turn and do that loop-de-loop, and that's where it lays over. And at that point, it's now moving away from Sherwood. It doesn't again go through Sherwood to pick up anybody. So that is.
Well, if it goes through Sherwood, it just goes through a different part of Sherwood.
Shed.
Fully aware. That's why you could reverse it, alternating buses coming into town
yeah, it's still a loop. It's just a larger loop. It's a this loop instead of a this loop. But I understand what you're saying.
I see.
We can talk more about it.
Okay. I'd love to hear your ideas. Like I said, I want to hear the ideas. I want to see it drawn out, and we can certainly talk about the pros and the cons. And if something seems to have, a possibility, then I think we can talk about, if we can keep it not cost neutral, which unfortunately with the COVID pandemic is all we can do right now. Then, we can.
Great. Kim, you have a question?
Just one last quick question. When you guys are looking at the routes, do you ever reevaluate the times? In other words, I think one of them goes till midnight or 1 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
Like reducing that to be like 11 p.m. or something. Is that ever considered?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Commissioner. That's a great question. So I do think that with the combination of the 93 and the 94, to get more efficiency out of both lines and to get better kind of afternoon service on the 94, we're probably going to bring in those ends a little bit on the line 93. So one of the surveys, the survey that we're going to do in January is actually going to try and see how many people, I have numbers, but it's good to know, who's taking the bus at 4:30 in the morning, who's taking the bus at 11:30 at night, Where are they trying to go? Are they trying to go all the way to Sherwood? Because those trips might end up having to be removed in order to kind of make, the route of the 94 is so much longer. So even adding the vehicle hours from the 93 into the 94 will likely not get us that same coverage because the 93 is just so much shorter. So I think that's a great question because I do think that is part of the proposal.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Brenda, when do you need to have, it sounds like we're going to do some outreach. We're going to bring you back. What's your time frame for wanting some direction on this downtown Sherwood routing?
I think thinking about when we're going to do our outreach for the proposal for the 93, 94, and maybe knowing that you'll probably want to make a decision on your alfresco program before spring. Maybe in February or March, it might make sense for me to come back and present to you the information we collected from our survey and hear where you're all on the alfresco program and potentially the reopening of Railroad. Maybe talk a little bit more about the park and ride, which I don't think we really had time to do today. Are there other places we can find some parking and, talk about that. I do believe that park and ride is owned by the city. So maybe there's a way we can figure out, if we have a new routing, is there parking that is closer to the new routing to serve as a de facto park and ride?
So would anyone like to engage with Julia and on council, Julia and Doug? But before that meeting?
I'd be happy to. Councilor Young.
Great.
Councilor Rosner, I know you and I have talked about this. If you are available and have interest, I think you have some ideas that add value.
You can take my spot.
Me too, I agree. You have great
ideas through Doug and Kim. That's fine. I don't want to get it too busy with electeds. Keep it efficient. I think Doug and Kim are thinking the same way I am. So
okay.
With that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
I
called you all commissioners. Those are from my days back in San Francisco, so my apologies. I know you're all counselors.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you all very
Brenda.
much. Have a great evening. Thank you.
So we're going to continue this work session to after our city council meeting because we didn't touch on the second item on our agenda. So again, we'll just put it on hold and come back to it. Other than that, we will adjourn, take a 5-minute break, and then start city council.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.